Hello, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are dialing in from. And thank you for being with me for this LinkedIn Live on empowering women in the workplace. So who am I and why am I in a situation where I think I may have something to offer you, and what's my credibility in this space? My name's Deborah Croft and I'm the co-CEO of Thriving Talent. My own leadership journey, I probably went through most of my leadership training to be an empowered female in the workplace at IBM, where I worked for many years. And I grew through this training from a specialist to director level. Then about 15 years ago, I went through a kind of significant career transition and gained coaching skills. And in that coaching, I worked a lot, and I continue to work in leadership coaching. And that gave me a window into other people's perspective and needs on what they need to have to grow and to develop, and what was holding them back. So I started having a window into other people's worlds. And then finally, in my role in Thriving Talent, we started working in this many years ago, and actually it started as e-learning. And we decided to try with small groups and female-only groups to address a particular need. People asked us for this. So we had small groups of 3 or 4, and over the years it's grown to running kind of cohorts of at least 16 individuals at a time. And of course, one of those programs is female only. And maybe, many of you, maybe you've designed your own programs, or you're choosing people to deliver them for you. But ultimately, when we're looking at these programs, it's really about understanding how can you learn every time you go through one. And every year we think, this is fantastic. We've really got a great program. And every year there's some tweaking. There's something that can make it even better. And that can come from like the participants. It can come from the managers. It can come from the team. And that's really, I've got a hair in my mouth, excuse me. That's really where I wanted to share, well, what have we learned? And I'd love you to share what you're learning as well. So we accelerate this movement. And before we dive into, so what are those criteria? What would make it a fantastic leadership program? And let's focus on females only. It's really important to think, well, what's the actual outcome? Why are we doing this? And the outcome is to increase the numbers of female leaders. That's why we're doing it. And when we think of the outcome, that's when we need to take a step back and look at our whole selves. As females, what else is happening in our worlds that we do need to pay attention to when we're investing in these leadership programs? And I'm going to take a few minutes to hop into that other world, your whole self. Now, whatever your sex and gender, we're all navigating moments that matter. Maybe in your organization, there's 5 generations, and each of us are probably like swans, navigating, those challenges, some with a fantastic mask no one else in your workplace would know. But these are events that either empower us to make some choices, think, yes, this is possible, and there are life events that make us question, is it really possible to navigate this moment and have a thriving career? Or indeed, is this a time when I need to either make a choice to step out completely, so actual visible attrition, or do I say no to opportunities because really there's a lot happening as it is? So for you right now, take a moment and pause and think, okay, what am I navigating right now? How does that influence my choices? So to build on my introduction, you can probably tell from the English, I'm from the UK, but moved to Switzerland 16 years ago. So in a very privileged position of speaking this live in my own native tongue. What am I navigating? Well, obviously self-care, because we need that to stay sane. Four parents, two parents-in-laws in their late 70s and mid-80s, who live in a different country. They live in the United Kingdom. 2 teenagers, one who is 19 and about to go off to university to study neuroscience. One who's in Suisse Romande, in Nyon, in the first year of gymnase, for those of you who are familiar with the system. And I honestly can't tell you whether she's going to get through with enough points. And then also I'm also navigating being a dog owner and everything else that happens with all the other hats you wear. But we're all navigating these moments. And I do want to bring it back to females, because whether we like it or not, in 2025, we still have the burden of care. And when you're thinking of designing your leadership program, it is so important that we take this bigger context, because often you can go through the best leadership program, and yet if moments that matter in your life are holding you back, you're still not going to say yes to that potential growth opportunity. So the simple fact is, women spend more time on caregiving. And maybe your leadership program is one that focuses on those individuals who are in their, maybe they've been leaders for some time and they're looking for that next level up. And maybe that fits into this age group of 45 to 75. And do know that the vast majority of this age group are providing that informal care. So again, when you're thinking of your design, be mindful of that. Equally, you may be looking at a leadership program that really speaks to people at the beginning of their leadership journey. Maybe they've been a leader or a team lead or a project manager for a few years, and they're now on their journey to grow to the next maybe band level. And the average age, well, certainly in Europe and in Switzerland, is 31 and a half for first-time parents, first-time mothers. There's a lot a first-time mother is also juggling. And so it's really important to be mindful of that as well. Well, what's that bigger system view of balancing personal and professional lives? Why is this important? Why am I bringing in caring into a conversation around leadership development programs? Well, because essentially coming back to the output of why you're doing this is because you want more female leaders. So being conscious and intentional of the fact that whether we like it or not, a significant percentage of female caregivers leave the workforce, so visible attrition, but also be mindful that there's a lot of women in the workforce who are making choices or feel they have to make choices where they juggle this caring and this career. And that's why I want to bring this into the conversation. So leadership programs can provide the right components, and they need to be thinking about the bigger context of, well, what else might be getting in the way? If those of you are working in an organization and you're hearing a lot of questions or getting any resistance around leadership programs for females, actually doing nothing isn't a solution. So whether we like it or not, we've got a long way to get gender equality at all levels of leadership. So if this is one of the solutions to achieve that, fantastic. And if you're in Switzerland looking at this, then again, and you're speaking to your Swiss senior leadership team or C-suite, in 5 years, we could be missing 800,000 employees. And we know a lot of that could be filled with females who have either left or they're actually opting out or being opted out of the workplace. So hold that perspective. And now let's come to the objection that we'll often hear: why females only? Who are we excluding? I mean, the irony here is Thriving Talent. We're all about pushing, equity and inclusion and enabling these humanized workplaces. And there's me talking to you as a CEO saying female only. Yeah, there's a risk of, female only, of course. It's, well, who are we excluding? there's a concern that by having female only, we're reinforcing that bias, that perpetuating that division. It can bring in the meritocracy. Well, are we doing this because we don't think women are capable? Absolutely not. We know, all of us go through different leadership journeys. So why are we saying, well, let's have a female only? And the bottom line is, it's about choice. Some of your females, and if you're joining as yourself as what do I need to grow, you might not want a female only program, and that's fine. As long as your organization is offering that choice, great. And there are many who do want female only. And I see that when I'm, at project kind of kickoffs or closures, and sometimes dipping into the different training modules, you see what happens when a group of women come on their own. The speed that 16 strangers create a psychological safety is impressionable. The speed at which people start speaking up, even if their preferences are diverse and range from kind of extroversion to introversion, they speak up more. So the fact is, it doesn't make us a special needs case. It's simply people thrive in different scenarios. And we know that many women really appreciate being in a space where there's no other voices except their own female voices, and they feel they can learn and grow quicker and be vulnerable in that safe space. So there's lots of arguments as to why you do need to have this choice, not at the risk of excluding others. Aspiration to action. So how do you make it happen? What are those really important criteria? And I want us to start with self. What do we want to pay attention to when we're thinking about leadership programs that really help an individual? And then how do we think of the bigger system? Because this doesn't fix the female. This is recognizing that maybe in your organization or in yourself, that there's lots of missed growth opportunities, and you want to gain the technical skills, the introspection, the self-awareness to empower your own future, because no one else will do it for you. And from a system point of view, it's thinking, well, that's great. We can invest lots of money, or I can invest my time as an individual female in this growth and this development. And yet, if the system doesn't create these opportunities of growth, then you're going to ask yourself, well, where can I take my whole self, so that's my whole caring and career, and make it work in another organization or an ecosystem that supports it? So again, leadership programs, we can't just think in a bubble. If that's a leadership program with these modules, and this is what we're going to cover, we need to think more holistically. So I'll dive into the self. If anyone has any feedback or ideas that have worked for them, then do pop that in the comments. At the end of the day, this is really about exchanging and learning. And yes, I've got credibility through the privilege of having worked on so many programs on my own journey, and I'm sure you have as well. So what I've missed here, make sure you fill in the blanks in the comments. So let's start with, well, what gets in our way? All of us have our own limiting beliefs. We're human beings. It's simply as it is. And those beliefs will be influenced by how we kind of grew up, our own family construct, our own kind of cultural, our nationality, what's seen as permissible and what one shouldn't be. Then maybe the country or culture you're now living in or you call home, and then of course the company you work in. So there's so many layers, isn't there, to self, and to realizing yourself, well, when you're at a point in your career and you're thinking, right, I want to grow, it needs to come from within. And that championing and that empowering has to come from us as individuals. And the programs that you design and deliver, or you follow, if you're looking at this from being a participant, they need to help you get out of your own way. So first of all, what's important is when we're navigating, remember that slide on moments that matter, it's really normal to think, right now, I can't take on more. And you may be absolutely right. And what if there is a way? What if there is a hidden kind of dream that you would like to do more? And yet all of those caring responsibilities, including self-care, just make it seem impossible. So often having that conversation with others around you, and first of all, normalizing that caring in career isn't easy, and it doesn't mean it's an inhibitor, really helps you open up to other possibilities. What and how could I juggle all these various pieces? Equally, you might get to a point where you think, right now, I can't give any more, and that's okay. But often we get into a narrative where you think it's impossible, and then we check out. The other piece that's common to everybody, this isn't gender specific, is that whole imposter experience. I'm sure all of us have had it where we think, oh, I'm going to get caught out. If they, here I am doing a LinkedIn Live on leadership programs. Well, what if I get caught out and they don't think I'm good enough? And what if I share one nugget or one idea that actually brings some useful contribution for you, then it's worth it. So we all struggle with imposter experience, and so your programs need to normalize that and think, okay, well, how do we navigate around it? Let's not pretend we don't have it. We do. And like I say, that's not gender specific. So when you're running leadership programs for all genders, it still needs to be in your program. The whole dare to dream. So again, think to yourself, when you're in a situation, do you kind of really think, what if? I mean, Aspiring talent, Natalie, our co-CEO, she often turns up with these magic wands, literally wands. She's like, right, what's the magic wand? And actually it's great because it really gets you into that spirit of, well, okay, if I could dare to dream, this is what I would love. This is what I would really, this is what I would strive for, if I could. So if I could juggle everything, if I did have that confidence, if I did have that self-belief, I've always wanted to be a CFO. And instead, often we get in our own way because of that limiting beliefs. Well, maybe I don't have enough, qualifications. Maybe I'm not in the right job, in the right environment. I mean, we've all heard statistics that I think it's about 60% men will apply for jobs that are about a 60% match in skills and expertise. And of course, females, you're looking at about 95%. And that holds us back from daring to dream. So it needs to be in that program. The reality is some of us are really uncomfortable with increasing visibility. Again, that could be linked to a cultural diversity too. Maybe it's just not seen as appropriate in your culture, your heritage, your family culture to be visible. Maybe it's seen as, oh, I'm showing up, showing off. And, lack of networking. We're all of us are quite bad at not investing that energy and time into networking, and yet I do want to bust the myth that it is always about time. Yes, it does take time. I'm not pretending otherwise, and it's about if you're doing it strategically, it's such a great investment. And yet often we don't feel equipped with the right tools and techniques and the clarity. Well, why am I going? What do I want to get out of it? And then that confidence. And the other piece that gets in our way, and I really am leaning into thousands of voices of females, is, that perception. What will others think? If I really put myself out there and I want to apply for something and I want to take up some space, will they think I'm too much? And finally, it's that waiting to be noticed. I mean, I don't know how many times we hear that, and that, well, I was working really, really hard, long hours, I was really successful, and I kept getting passed over for promotion. So we can't wait to be noticed. We have to be visible. So what's needed? You're designing leadership programs for training. First of all, it's about that choice. As I've said, don't assume that all females want to be part of a female leadership program. They may not be, and that's okay, but at least have a preference and a choice. And when you are designing it and putting it together, then it really works much more successfully if people are a similar band. When you're doing mentoring, of course, it's different. You can have mentoring programs where actually diversity of band levels is actually really helpful. But when you're looking at these programs, it's really important to keep a similar band level. What can happen, not always, but what can happen is the more those females who are more advanced in their career end up taking on a bit of a motherly role to those who aren't, and they don't learn as much. Okay, so it's really about making sure the community you create are at a similar level in their career, not age, career. From a module point of view, we all know, you can Google what should be in a leadership training program. We all know that. So the training, it needs to be experiential. It needs to get people out of their comfort zone. Just talking at someone or asking them to read something, which is probably why we evolved our e-learning, because we've got to get out of our comfort zone, and often being in a safe space and doing that, and then learning and leaning in and learning from each other is a great way to really put it into practice. So really make sure, and virtual or in person, virtual is fine. Don't stop putting these programs in place because you think, oh, we can't be in person. And then the actual content, it needs to be blended. And this comes back to how I kicked off, because as individuals, you need to have a program that is that introspection. Who am I? Who am I now? What are my superpowers? Maybe I did take a career break. And my goodness me, if it was a career break around caring or community, or, there's so many more skills you've gained. Yeah, so actually, what are my superpowers now? What's important to me? Where do I get derailed? And crucially, what is my caring and career balance? What are my boundaries? What do I say yes to? What do I say no to? And that is such an important part, because that needs to be in place to then start thinking, okay, what if I dare to dream? So the training needs to incorporate that inner self piece, and it also needs to have the technical skills. Okay, and those technical skills, let's not assume we all have them. Maybe we've read about them, and maybe we've listened to a podcast. But you really need to, provide some clever training on the different topics, and then again, make people accountable. So whether that is about building your stakeholder map, whether it's about thinking strategically on, okay, who or what can help me, whether it's really being clear on your brand elevator statement. When did you really sit down and refresh that so it represents who you are and your why, your purpose? So think kind of Simon Sinek. You need that to then have those courageous conversations. How equipped are you at having courageous conversations? Not only at work, at home, because often it's our perception of what our home life may be like and all those responsibilities that stops us. Well, often courageous conversations help us articulate what we need to then open up some opportunities in our professional life. From a program design, obviously diverse learning opportunities. So what I mean by that is, if you can have a program which has some training, like group training, like I say, we try to keep to groups of 16 because we just feel then everyone has a voice. So you have group settings, but then you also have in smaller ones. We have like pods, 3 to 4 people who meet, very regularly, so they can do a deep dive into the training content, and they have each other's accountability and actually doing the homework in between. Some people love sharing on like say a WhatsApp, so maybe you'll have a group for those who love sharing. People love the technical training, so you might have a big kind of career blueprint book. And, for us, we share that in little bits all the way through. And for those individuals who love to know the bigger picture, we also give them the whole book at the beginning, all 113 pages. So they know exactly what's coming. The other thing that's really helpful is a tool. So maybe you already use a tool. Maybe you've done insights yourself, or your group uses MBTI. We love positive intelligence. It really gets you to your strengths, but also your derailers. And the other thing that's really important is I'm sure you know, is whatever your program looks like, having a requirement where they have to ask for at least 20 people for feedback is really important across all life, not just in your professional world. And if you want to be a master and you have the absolute success, individual coaching, we know, really helps transform that experience, because in between these different sessions, you can do a deeper dive with your leadership coach. Maybe it's that networking that holds you back. Maybe you've got some limiting thoughts around your being visible and amplifying your influence. A leadership coach helps you get to dive into what you really need. So that's the self, the system. It actually starts when we're thinking, how do we look at the impact of these programs? Is it worth it? Before you invest in anything, time or money, then you've got to be thinking about, okay, let's look at the end result. So imagine 4 to 6 months from now, we've run through the program, we've got 6 females who have clarity, they have courage, they have confidence, they have conviction, they have a real clear, career plan. Then what? Are there opportunities to grow? And that isn't just promotion, which automatically creates fear and disengagement from many older, often middle-aged men. That means I'm out of a job. It's not. It's looking for what are those other projects, like high visibility projects, P&L type projects. So it's not always promotion, but you've got to do that thinking before, because if you cannot create those, and if the business isn't working with you, say in HR or L&D, to create those opportunities, it's just not worth doing. Well, it is, because you'll empower some amazing women and then they'll leave you. Paying for a seat isn't enough. So one of our real successful strategies that we adopted about 4 years ago was the manager as part of the program. And they need to be part of that program because it's also their learning journey. But we need to have managers because they're the people who can be the champion and look at stakeholder mapping and navigating of who and what can help this individual. So if you want them to be part of the program, you've got to motivate them. Managers are busy enough, right? Yeah, they have your performance management. You've got to motivate them because you want them to be part of this throughout the whole 6 months or 4 months. So this is the opportunity where you say to these managers, this isn't just solely about championing this one individual that you're putting into the program. This is about a bigger cultural change. You're part of a bigger vision for what we want to create. And that's really important motivation. You can be a change champion. And then alongside, for those managers, maybe you're being a refresh, or maybe for the first time, you take them back through what it means to be a real ally. Not only for gender, what it means to be a real ally at work and in your personal life. What is the reality of an individual female's life? What are those biases that impede growth? Remind them, get familiar. I remember sometimes people don't like it. I know sometimes there's been reactions when we talk about privilege. People get a bit bristly and defensive. It's there. Let's not judge or be defensive. Let's say, well, how do we help clear the way? Also for managers, make it about them, give them something. So that common tool you use, and like I say, positive intelligence is great. We have no affinity with it, by the way, so I'm not saying that to plug it. It's just, we love it. But managers really have that moment as well to have introspection. So give it to them, and then they can have this great conversation with their participant. And so what came up as your superpowers and strengths? And in times of stress, how do you get derailed? So how do we feed each other from a strength point of view, but how do we navigate and help each other when we might be in a derailed situation? And this is where the mind the gap feedback is great. So feedback for the participants is super important. But then what you can also do is bring in an anonymous survey halfway through, which asks all the participants, how good is your manager at giving feedback? How empathetic are they? They respond anonymously. Managers do the same. And you just compare and contrast. And it's not to defend or judge, it's purely to create some curiosity, to say, there's a bar graph. I wonder where you are. I wonder how this can be a conversation starter. And then finally, what a great opportunity to really celebrate and champion these individuals. The participants can become your alumni, the ambassadors for pushing their way through, for leaving the door open for other females, and the managers likewise. They can champion and be that ally. So I hope that helps. We're at the 30 minutes. Thank you for being with me, for keeping me company, and do share any other ideas you've had, any challenges, share with me on LinkedIn or privately on my email. But together, looking at the whole Southern system, we know we can close that gap of 152 years quicker if we work together. So thanks for being with me. And it's Friday afternoon, so sun is shining here in Switzerland. Have a fabulous weekend and take care. Bye-bye.